General Mark Hertling is a CNN national security and military analyst. For 4 decades, he served in the U.S. Army, rising to commanding general of U.S. Army Europe and 7th Army. And it's good to see you. It's been a while.
It has been a while, John. It's good to be back with you.
Thank you. Now, in an interview with The Economist last month, the head of the Ukrainian army set February 23rd as a deadline to rearm Ukrainian troops. He said, I need 300 tanks, 600 to 700 IFVs, infantry fighting vehicles, 500 howitzers. Then I think it is completely realistic to get to the lines of February 23rd. So that's 36 days now, not just to convince allies to commit to sending those weapons like tanks, but also to deliver them as well. After February 23rd, that's when the Russians are expected to launch a major offensive. It seems like the Ukrainians are cutting it pretty close and not necessarily by choice.
But it's also a pretty big ask. When you're talking about that many pieces of combat equipment, that is the equivalent of 2 armored divisions of equipment coming as gifts from allied nations. And, you know, it's a pretty big ask, not only from the standpoint of resources, but the question might be, John, where do you, General Zelensky, where do you think these are going to come from? There isn't a big store somewhere where you just pull out 300 tanks, 600 infantry fighting vehicles. And in addition to that, have your soldiers trained on them by February 23rd. And have the support infrastructure and resupply capabilities to literally provide a logistics supply chain trail for that. So it is a big ask, John, and it almost is beyond the pale that General Zelensky would say something like that, because it is quite a bit of equipment.
So what is the more likely scenario here? What are the Ukrainians more likely to end up getting?
Well, I think that's what's going to be determined at the Ramstein meetings later this week. What you're asking for is really contributions to a defense force. But not only that, there is the requirement, especially for these frontline vehicles that are Western technology, to train Ukrainian soldiers on the capabilities of these vehicles. As we're seeing now, after the United States said that they would offer Patriot missiles, and the expectation is that these weapon systems that are literally worth billions of dollars will suddenly appear and be capable of countering a Russian threat. Now that we're training Ukrainian soldiers at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, there's the realization that, yes, this takes a long time. These are not something you just put a soldier in and say, point and shoot.
I mean, if you don't ask, you don't get. I get that's sort of one side of the equation. But the Ukrainians will receive about 14 Challenger tanks from the UK, and that sort of commitment by the British is not just for battlefield purposes, I guess, because they're saying it also sends a strong message to the Kremlin. Here's the British Foreign Minister. Listen to this.
What Putin should understand is we are going to have the strategic endurance to stick with them until the job is done. And the best thing that he can do to preserve the lives of his own troops is to recognise that we're going to stick with the Ukrainians until they are victorious.
It would be ideal if Putin woke up one morning and realised he's bet the farm on a loser, but that hasn't happened so far. But if there is this sort of rush of heavy weapons, of tanks and infantry vehicles into Ukraine for some kind of massive offensive, the next couple of weeks, will he at least maybe take pause? Will he reassess in some way?
Well, when you're talking about 14 Challenger tanks from the UK, again, I'm going to suggest people take an appetite suppressant and understand what this means. 14 tanks is a tank company. It has about 90 people in it. What General Zalewski and the Ukrainians are looking for are multiple tank divisions of 300, 600 vehicles, as the general said in December. That takes a long time. And even with 14 Challenger tanks, it's going to take a significant requirement to train Ukrainian soldiers on that very modern, technologically advanced weapon system that the UK is giving, that's very different from the T-72s that they've been fighting on. And in addition to that, they have to have the repair parts, the capability to conduct the repair and resupply these vehicles with ammunition. So again, you won't see, the UK may be giving these 14 tanks to Ukraine, but you will not see them on the battlefield within days. It will probably be within weeks. Just like the 50 Bradley systems that the United States are giving the Ukrainians, they are now beginning the training on those vehicles at Grafenwehr and Hohenfels training area in Germany, a place where I know very well. So it will take a long time to get the familiarization and the crew training before those pieces of equipment can be found on the battlefield.
Mark Herdling, thanks so much for being with us, sir. We appreciate your insights.
Pleasure, John. Thank you.